Welcome back. This tutorial today continues our left turn into materials, and we'll do a little more work on the warp dome. If you like these tutorials or find them helpful, then please remember to like, subscribe, and click the notification bell icon to be notified when I post new tutorials. Welcome back. Today we are concentrating on materials for our starship. We've created a blue-green/gray hull, some diffuse glass textures for our sensor domes and bridge domes, and that light in the back. We've changed the materials for the back of the warp engines and the intercoolers. And the most complex materials so far have been our copper and brass texture. And we've got one more complex texture to go, and that's this hull, these concentric circles in here. So I've got HullGray on them, and we're going to change that. So now I've got nothing. Whoops. Yeah, okay, so I've got my concentric circles selected. I'm going to hit new, and I'm going to call it, oh, wait a minute. That was stupid. Tell you what, we can save ourselves a lot of time. Whoa, 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 whoa. Oh, no wonder. There, let's go to rendered. Let's go to rendered. And we'll start making changes here. So our concentric circles are selected, but they've got no color to them, no texture, no material. So I'm going to pick copper again, and I'm going to hit plus. It's going to give us copper.001 again, and we're going to delete that name, and we're going to call this antique gold. All right. So most of it is done for us, just like when we did our brass. And we're going to throw in some new hex textures here. Now we're actually going to change a little more on this one. But first, we're just going to change these three material nodes. I'm going to make the top one F like Frank, D like David, 700, and it's very yellowish. And then the next one, I'm trying to remember how I made this one. I think I looked up some different hex for gold, and I kept them halfway between gold and copper. So the second one for the first Ansitropic is C like Charlie, B like Brown, 6, D like Delta, 5, 1. And then the third one is C like Charlie, 8, 7, 5, 3, 3. Now, it looks okay. It's not great, so we've got to change I think we keep the blue Ansitropic, but I want to add another diffuse. So for another mix shader, so we're going to Shift A, shader, mix. We're going to grab this and drop it up here between these two. So we've got the mix shader feeding this, and we're going to want another diffuse texture. So texture, come on, diffuse, where are you? Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe that's under shader. Diffuse, ta-da. Okay, we're going to hook this up here to the second shader, but that's all wrong. So we need one more hex code. Actually, here, let me zoom in. Make this a little easier. And I'm going to throw this in here. Hang on a second. I guess the last time I made one of these, I did a couple of changes. I changed my noise to 20. I changed my strength. I bumped that up a little bit. I made that 0.02. Are there any other changes? I don't think so. I think I left everything else the same. All right, so it doesn't look like much here. But again, I did promise I'd show you some tricks to make this a little better. All right, so we're back out here, and we've thrown textures into an awful lot, but it hasn't seemed to have made all that much of a difference. And let me show you. It's made some, but it's not great. It looks a little more realistic. They're not textures, but we do have some nice materials on it. But if we were to render it and things look like this, that's not stellar, at least not yet. But there's more to creating a decent model and some decent renders than just what you plaster onto the shape of your hull. So we're going to do that next, and then we'll go in and we'll make the warp engine. Hopefully that's a nice wow factor. But what I want you to do is I want you to go to your environment, or scene, I'm sorry, scene selection. And if you haven't added Filmic color management yet, I do believe that I've got that in the description of every one of my tutorials where you can go and get it, and there's instructions there. I absolutely suggest that you add it. The changes that I'm going to suggest will change what our renders look like. So you would pick Filmic, and then for me, I'm going to pick, I'm sorry, this view up here I'm going to change to default. And I'm going to change this to Kodak KAF 3000. All right, why? Here's why. Let's go back and see what this would look like when it was rendered. And it's very dark. So now I can do different things with this. I can change, what I'm going to do is I'm going to change my lights. I'm going to bump them up. But I could also increase the gamma over here or the exposure. But what I want is I'm going to take these, I'm going to go to the material here, and I'm going to make this, I think, 25. 1. And let's go to rendered. I may have to make them 50. Getting there. Oh, I could have left it. Now let's just bump these up to 50. Better. All right. Now, I want to show you why. Shift D, I'm going to duplicate my camera. Control 0 to make that slightly changed camera the default. I want to rotate in the X, no, rotate Y. Why is this not? Hang on, sorry, 3D cursor, duh. Rotate X probably was correct, yes. All right, so I want to do this so that the phaser nipple is just either touching the bottom or really close. And I really should duplicate the mirror, the warp engine. We'll do that in a little bit, but rotate Z. And that's a pretty classic pose for the Enterprise, and just rotate the whole thing here. All right, let's see what this looks like. I'm going to render this out, and I'll come back when it's done. Heck, this one time I'm going to let you see the render as it comes in. Take a look at that gold/copper and the copper dish and the brass spike. It's still figuring out how it should look. But contrast that with the semi-gloss, the satin finish of the hull. And we've got the lights. Okay, I'm going to bump up the lights inside the sensor dome. But this is already starting to look far more like a real-world object, like an actual model, than something done in 3D. And it's because of the use of the materials and the lights and the rendering settings using Filmic color management system. You can get and I chose a particular scene set of presets, which basically comprises like a camera and choices of film. I didn't change anything with the camera, though. I mean, it's not like I changed the focal field or the sensor distance or anything like that. But just with the standard RGB display device and the default view with the look of Kodak KAF 3000 film makes this look much more realistic. The hull is showing that blue-green gray that we chose. It's showing it very well because we've got a gloss and diffuse mix. It's almost looking like a satin finish. The only thing that probably would have made it better is if I'd have added some noise displacement. And to see a sample of that, look at the copper dish. It's got what you would say would be, say, slight imperfections in the surface texture. And the same with the brass and the antique gold. So this is approximately the right size for it. Let's bump up that sensor light. Not sure. Why this is coming out this way. I do need to bump that up. That should be a 2. All right. So I'm going to re-render that, and I'll come back when it's finished. Or better yet, hang on. When we get to that, we don't even need to render the whole thing. We'll let it render. I could have actually specified where, but it's near enough to the center that it won't take long. But we've got that antique gold. We've got a nice hull material. We've got a nice copper material and a pretty good brass. I think the brass actually looks good. Here we go with the light. All right, that's better. So it looks similar to what we saw in that screen capture from the Roddenberry vault, right? Where you've got the light green sensor dome and the copper color for the dish and the blue-green-gray for the production run Enterprise. The first pilot gray hull is actually grayer and lighter. So if you want to go back and make like a Pike era ship, you would change it. All right, so this isn't looking bad. This isn't looking bad at all. Now, to get the real wow factor with this, we're gonna throw in some work for our warp engines. So we're going to change the texture for this. We're going to get rid of the frosted glass texture. And we're going to create a warp dome. I think I made this thing too thick, but it'll do. All right. Now, I've seen the warp domes. Personally, I like to have a white frosted warp dome. with layers. But when they did the restoration for the 11-foot Enterprise at the Smithsonian, Gary Kerr stated that this was kind of an orange-tinted dome. So we can either do that, or we can go with kind of a classic peach. In any case, all right, the first thing to do, of course, is we're going to make this a mix shader. And we're going to pick a glass and leave a Beckman, but we're going to wildly change the roughness. We want that to be a 0.8. And I guess we're going to leave the, well, let's take down the IOR to like 1.3. And then we're going to add some, I used to always use diffuse, but let's go with glossy and bump the roughness of the glossy up to 0.5. Now this in itself isn't really going to do enough because, number one, there are no lights in there, and it hasn't got the right colors. So let's pick this color, and I don't have hex for this, but let's make this a kind of slightly orangish, almost peach color. And for the glossy, a little more yellowish, but not too much. Keep it pretty light. That ought to do it. The only thing I'm going to change is this GGX here. We're going to make this multi-scatter. All right, so this is already looking better. It's reflecting the light that's hitting it from out here where we placed our lights, but it's also going to need to transmit something from inside. So, time to make some lights. I'm going to jump out to an unused layer. And we've got our cursor is centered, right? And we're going to add Shift A. We're going to add a UV sphere. I don't need something really detailed, but I am going to rotate this. So rotate 90. Now, if you remember, I started off by showing us a Christmas tree light. That's the shape here, or this shape here. It used to be that outdoor lights were bigger and even a little more bulbier than this, kind of like these. And back in the old days, a lot of them were just white. But it's this shape that's important. Oh, here's why. Figure I got enough samples now. Here's a shot from Metamorphosis. And it's a marvelous shot. It was only used once during the run of the series. But you see the warp engine and the lights and the spinners head on here on this starboard warp engine, right? And you can see the lights behind the spinners, but, and partially because of the spinners, they kind of look triangle in shape. And there's a reason for that. But sometimes they just looked round. This is from Journey to Babel. This is also Journey to Babel, and you can actually see different colors in here. This is from the Immunity Syndrome. And some of these look almost triangularish, while some of these look round. Again, Immunity Syndrome. And again, the immunity syndrome. So it's interesting that the lights seem to get thinner towards the center. And it's because these were Christmas tree lights. So these are those kind of egg-shaped lights, and they point towards the center. So they're not in there straight. It's one of the few things that they, I don't want to say got wrong with the Smithsonian. They set them up so that the lights are solidly in place. They're easy to replace. The warp domes are attached with magnets. All they have to do is go in and pull the thing off. It won't fall off on its own because it's held in place with really strong rare earth magnets. But they don't have to use screws or tighten bolts or do anything to possibly damage the model itself. They can just pull off that warp dome, replace the lights. So, I mean, in that way, it's far more advanced and far better for the model. But if we want to make it look like the old days, we're going to want these interesting shapes, and we're only going to be able to do that if we imitate how the lights were set up. This shot is from Elan of Troyes, but they also use the same shot at the beginning of the Tholian web. And you can see the different colors, kind of greenish. There's a little blue down here. This is white. This is red. This over here is orange. So, and then you can even see some of the lights here. And there's other shots like the shot from Bread and Circuses, where although it's harder to see here because most of the lights are off and the spinners are in the way, this looks spectacular over here. And we're going to do the same thing. So we're going to tab into our model. We're going to pick this very center front vertex, and we're going to run down here and we're going to turn on our proportional editing. I don't want sharp here. I want smooth, I think. I'm going to hit a G to, G, and then spin the wheel. Come on. What's going on here? G. Is it because I'm moving or something? I should be able to see G. Oh. Ha ha. Take off the 3D cursor. Turn it to bounding box center. Hit G and then use the spin on your mouse wheel and hit X. All right, so I want to influence most of the model, and I want to pull this out. There we go. We've got a nice egg shape. So that's our Christmas tree light. All right, we're going to scale this down. We're going to scale it down even smaller, but first I'm going to grab this and move it here. All right. So I want this to appear roughly the size of one of those lights we saw. So I'm going to scale this to about that. As a matter of fact, I want to position it so that it's out here, but I also want this to be rotated. It's probably about there. All right, I also want to bring in at least our dome, if not also our warp engine. So I'm going to go to 3, and our light is way the heck over here. So I'm going to grab Y, and I'm going to move it kind of center here. All right. So we're going to make at least a grand total of 10 of these lights. 5 of them will be large white lights that are egg-shaped. Okay, cool. But I also want to make it easy for us to do this. And I've actually got that pretty well centered. Huh, look at that. Grab Y, and whoops, grab Y. That's nicely centered. All right, cool. All right, but what I want to do right now is I want to go to this Warp Engine Z tab, and I want to grab one vertex hit Alt, right mouse click on the next vertex, and we select all these vertices in here. Shift S, cursor to selected. Puts the cursor right in the middle of all of these. A to deselect. Tab out. We no longer need the warp engine. So we're going to go back to our little goose egg here. I'm going to hit smooth for shading. And let's see. Huh. There's our dome. Okay, well, we don't really need it. We just need our egg and our centered cursor. 3, and we're looking at this head-on. All right, I'm going to change this bounding box center to 3D cursor. I'm not going to put any materials on it yet, but I am going to hit Shift-D, and we're going to rotate this. So 360 degrees in any circle. There are going to be 10 of these. Normally, I would say you would rotate them 36 degrees, but if we rotate this 36 degrees, it's going to be right next to it. I don't want these yet. So we can do that, but we want to rotate this another 36, or it would be 72 degrees. So Shift-D, rotate 72, Shift-D, rotate 72, and Shift-D, rotate 72. All right. So now, Shift-D, rotate 36, and we're going to take off the 3D cursor and make it bounding box center. I want to scale this down a little. Okay, not bad. Turn this back to 3D cursor, Shift-D, rotate 72, Shift-D, rotate 72, Shift-D, rotate 72, Shift-D, enter, rotate 72, enter. We've got our lights, our warp lights in place. So that's pretty good. But if we were to render all this out right now, it wouldn't really look like much. Hang on. So if I grab everything here, I'm not going to bother rendering it. I'm just going to go to rendered view, shading, and of course no lights coming from the inside because we haven't given them a material yet. Whoops, 3. I'm going to highlight this top one here, and we're going to make that a bright white light. Let's see. I think I use about a 3 on that. So we're going to make a new material. I'm actually going to make 5 of these, even though they're all going to be pretty much identical. So this is going to be white warp light 1. And instead of diffuse, we're going to make this emission. And we're going to make this, oh, I'm sorry. I'm being stupid. We want this to be a mix shader. The first one, we can make emission. And we're going to make it fairly bright. We're going to make that 3. 3 doesn't sound all that bright, but with 10 lights in here and many of them on at once, there will be a cumulative effect. This is going to sound stupid, but for the second shader, I want you to pick glass. Why? It doesn't actually add anything to it right now. But when we go to animate blinking lights, you're going to want to shift the factor. Here's why. All right, so we've got one light. I'm going to go to rendered view, and it's casting a light on everything else. But it's not all that bright yet. So I'm going to take this factor down to 0. That's as bright as that light's going to get. It's 100% this emission material. What happens, though, if I take it to 1? it didn't really turn off. What it did was it went to glass. So if I add in our external lights, you'll notice it's essentially just transparent and reflecting everything around it, like a Christmas tree light. So that's how we're going to set up all of our lights. Take this back down to 0 because we want that lit right now. And we're going to do all the other white lights. So this is, oops, new, what do we call it? White warp light 2. And we're going to make this a mix shader. Take this to 0. Make this first one emission. Make the strength of the emission 3. And make this second one glass for animating later on. Okay, cool. And we're going to do the same with this, this, and this. So new, white, warp, light 3. Mix, come on. 0. Emission 3. Glass. New. White, warp, light. This is number 4, yes? 1, 2, 3, 4, 4. Mix. 0. Emission 3. Glass. Last one. White, warp, light 5. Mix 0. Emission 3. And glass. Okay, cool. So now we've got the color lights. This top one flip back and forth between red and green. For our purposes, we're just going to make it green. So today, new, we're going to call this warp green, green light 1. We're going to do the same thing. Mix 0. Emission at least 3. Sometimes with the smaller colored lights, you've got to pick a different color. Just make it green. And for the second one, of course, glass. This and this are going to be orange. So new, orange, warp, light 1, mix 0, emission 3, and we want orange and glass. Now, I'm going to go over here, make this easy on us. I'm going to pick the orange warp light 1 that we did. I'm going to hit plus and change warp light 1 to warp light orange warp light 2 and leave everything else exactly the same. Let's go down here to this middle one that we skipped. New. This is going to be blue warp light 1. I should have actually named them all warp color light. That way they would have all been together. But whatever. So mix 0. Emission. Pick a blue. 3. Glass. Okay. And we've already turned this one orange, so that leaves this one always blinked red. So new. Red warp light 1. Mix 0. Emission red 3 and glass. Now, of course, if we look at this in a rendered view, it's not going to look very good. But if we add in the rest of our model, right? Actually, tell you what, I'm going to go to 0 here, and we're going to render it out, and I'll be back. Okay, we're coming up on our warp engine. There it is. Nice. So we can make some adjustments to the brightness of each of the individual lights and such, but they're already giving us what we wanted. They are looking kind of triangular, pointed towards the center. We're going to throw in the warp blades, and you would think, since I've pretty much duplicated this from another model that I've made, that it would look exactly the same. It doesn't look exactly the same, but it's awfully close. Like I said, all we got to do is tweak some of it, especially the little color lights. But the white lights, I think we could make a little brighter as well. Not much. They were never in your face, but this is turning out pretty well. All right. So next, let's add those blades. Why am I pausing that? I don't need to pause that. Just hit escape. All right. Cool. 3. No, better yet, 1. All right, we've already got this centered here because it's how we got our lights in place. So I'm going to Shift A, and we're going to add a mesh. It is going to be a UV sphere, right? But I want to change this. I want to make this a 100 and maybe 50. Make it kind of round. All right, cool. We're going to rotate 90 degrees. Whoops, sorry. Out here. Rotate 90 degrees. All right, fine. Now, well, first let's scale this down. So, scale. Now, I want this to be not as large as this dome. As a matter of fact, this dome has a thickness to it. You can actually kind of see it here. So I want it smaller than this outer dome. I want it larger than where these lights are. That'll do. Actually, maybe not. Grab X. That's centered where I want it. Okay, so nope, I've got to scale this down a little bit, right about there, I would imagine. These actually cast shadows on the dome during the original series, so we want some gap between the dome and these. So I'm going to hit Tab, A to deselect everything. The halfway mark is right here on the edge. The spinners did not go into the ship. So I'm going to hit B and delete this back half of verts. As a matter of fact, we're going to delete most of the verts. So I'm going to move this to an as yet unoccupied space right here. Boom. Cool. Let's look at this head on. Tab into it, and everything's deselected. All right. About any 2 of these rows is about what we want. So we'll keep the top 3, 1, 2, 3 sets of verts, and we're going to delete everything from here all the way around to here. So I'm going to pick C and just pick vertices. All right. Really wanted to do this one time. I guess I could do all these different sets, but that's just too much work. So B, select most of this. I want to leave these 2 rows. So these three rows of verts. B, get rid of that. Okay, so now let's go in here and take a look. So these 3 centers are good. As a matter of fact, that's actually really pretty good. C, and I want to get this. And 1, 2, 3. And we're leaving the center. Center one has got to stay. Center vertex. Oh. I included one row too many. All right. So everything except for these 3 rows of verts has been selected. X vertices. Great. Now we're going to create a material for that. New. We're going to call it, I don't know, Warp Blade Gray. Gray or silver. I really don't need much. Diffuse is fine. But like with everything else, I think I'm going to make this a mix. So add diffuse, and we're going to go with kind of a medium gray. Something like that. Control C. Now here for the second one, I want some gloss. We're going to throw in the exact same gray. I think Gary Kerr says these were gaffer's tape, or at least they're using gaffer's tape now. So I'm going to take this down to like 0.2, a little gloss, mainly gray, and it's that's interesting. It's shinier than I thought it would be. Oh, it's because I'm not looking at materials. That's why. There we go. All right, so 3. Now we've got 10 of these, and we've got this circle right in the center right in the right spot. So we're going to Shift D, and we're literally going to, make sure you're on cursor for center. We're going to rotate this 36. Stupid. Rotate 36 degrees. Is that right? It would be right if we were doing 10. Whoops. Control Z. We're not. We're doing 12. So 360 divided by 12 is 30. Duh. All right. So rotate 30. Whoops. Helps if you select this. Rotate 30. Perfect. Shift D. Rotate 30. Shift D. Rotate 30. And so on. Shift D. Rotate 30. 2, 3, 4, 5. Let's do that one more time. Shift D. Enter. Rotate 30. Enter. Okay, cool. It's already, one of these is already selected, so I'm going to shift right mouse click each of the others and control J. Join them into one object. Marvelous. Shift D. Rotate 180. Enter. Now that's already selected. Shift right mouse click, Control J, and we have one object for the spinner. Marvelous. All right, so now I'm going to move this up to an occupied spot, and we're going to grab our lights layer, light layer for the outside of the ship, and cameras, and the rest of the ship. So we've got our lights, we've got our cameras, we've got pretty much everything. I'm going to go back here, and let's, I'm in materials mode. Let's change that to just wireframe for now. A to deselect, and we're going to render this out, and I'll come back when it's done. it kept bugging me, this sensor dome. Doesn't look exactly the way I want. And I think I goofed. Did I make that a mix shader? We'll go back and we'll look at that again in a minute. But anyway, we're coming up on the warp engines, so we should see what those look like soon. And not bad. That looks very close to what the model looked like during production of the original series. Is it perfect? No. But it is so much closer than most of the other attempts that I've seen. So we've got our kind of diffuse, semi-transparent, roughed up imitation of a plastic clear hemisphere that's tinted a little orange. It's got white lights and colored lights behind it. It's got a spinning set of fan blades in front of it, and the materials for the rest of the ship are pretty much in place. Now, the materials aren't enough to really push this over the edge and make it look just that much more real. We're going to need to make textures. So that's going to be one of the things that we'll do later. But for right now, just kind of as placeholders to make our renders look just a little better, we've got some decent materials. We've got something that looks like a warp engine now. We've still got to put the 3 divots around the outside and then add the leather snaps with brass cap fittings onto our model. But this is already looking pretty good. All right, so let's see. Let's escape out of that one. Let's go take a look at the material for our sensor dome. Yeah, I just did glass. That was my mistake. All right, let's make this a mix. Kind of like what we were doing with our windows. Let's pick glass and rough this up to like 0.8 again. And that's fine. I think, did I take that down? No, I didn't take that down. But for the second shader, let's add translucent. That should make all the difference in the world. Let's see what that would look like. That is so much better. That's what I want. Okay. So I'm going to render that out now with the new sensor dome. And there we go. Much, much better. Much, much better. The light is a little more evenly distributed. You can still see that there's a light inside. It's being diffused through that diffuse glass / translucency, which I like to think of as kind of a translucent frosted plastic, because that's, forgive me, but I really think that that's pretty much what that looked like in the pictures that we've been looking at for the original series production model of the USS Enterprise. Anyway, all right, the next thing, I suppose, is those 3 divots in the warp engine. Actually, I don't know why I keep pausing that. I don't need to pause it. We just need to quickly... Oh, this has almost been a second hour. Tell you what, that's going to be it for today. Next time, we will do the divots and the snaps around the warp engine, the front of the warp engine, the Bussard collectors. And then we're going to mirror the warp engine and all the lights and everything, all the little doodads that we've been taking all this time to make, so that we've got the complete ship. The only thing that's missing are a few materials and all the textures. We will start on that next time. Thank you guys for sticking with it so far. Oh, almost forgot. File, save. I had been doing a lot of work earlier, actually yesterday, and I was working on some of the materials that I wanted to show you today. And right at the end, of course, Blender crashed on me. It blinked. And I had to start all over. Oh, before I go, all right, so that's fine, that's good. But what I want to do is I want to show you something. Let me go grab something on my desktop real quick. And all right, so let me open this and close it here and open it again. That way it'll pop up on that monitor. Great. So this is similar to what we've done. This is the test model that I was making, and it uses the same rendering information, the same materials and such that I've walked through with you. And it makes a decent render. Now, yes, is it missing details? Yes. But it looks more like a model now. It reacts better with light. And it's starting to look like what we want it to look like. Now, here's the thing. I made a bunch of test renders in different, using different films, so to speak, in Blender. So this is the, what was SOT T-base 5 with a half a gamma and a 5 for exposure. This is Kodak KAF 3000 T04. This is just a front shot with the Kodak KAF 3000. I really like that. I think it shows the colors and the materials and even some of the textures that we want very well, so long as you increase your lighting or increase your gamma. But it even makes the warp lights look pretty good. And here's what it looks like from the back once you've got everything mirrored out. But there's more. Here's that KAF 3000. Here's Eastman XX negative 12-minute exposure, which is also very nice. So KAF 3000, slightly lighter Eastman XX negative 12-minute exposure. But if you go with the 4-minute exposure, it looks very bright indeed with all the same lights. So if you like this with slightly harsher shadows, it's fine. It's great. This is Fujifilm F-125. And you'll notice it does things differently. Things look much brighter. I would suggest reducing your gamma. And it also changed how it handles the colors. It's not bad. It's just I don't like really how the warp engines look with this. And with Fujifilm F400, everything seems to get kind of a slight reddish tint. It almost looks pink. Fujifilm FC1 looks a little too green to me, but still nice render. The Canon Optura 981111 is nice, a little bright, but you could change that. Everything else looks pretty good. This is also Canon Optura 981111 SLRR, so single lens reflex. I don't know what the second R is. This is what Kodak Porta 800 looks like. Not bad. A little washed out. This is what Kodak Porta, I think is Portrait 400 NC, which I think looks very nice. A little bit of a green tint, which is influencing the copper down here, but not really in a bad way. It looks very similar to the way it did during the run of the original series. This is Kodak Ektachrome 320 T like Thomas. Now, the colors are there, and they are really emphasized. So the slight greenish, bluish, grayish of the hull is now just almost like a light lime green. The antique gold fares a little better, but the copper is a little too dark. And the spinners inside our warp engine look too dark. But, on the other hand, the lights inside the warp engine look spectacular. Let's see. The Kodak DSC S3154 looks way too green for me. The Kodak DSC S3155 actually looks pretty good. A little washed out. You can control that with the gamma and the exposure, but the colors look good. A little light, like I said, a little washed out. The Kodak DSC3156, on the other hand, has that greenish tint back, but with more yellow. The Agfa Color Ultra 50, again, too washed out and a little too blue. The Agfa Chrome CT Precise 100 is really purple. The Agfa Advantix 400, a little too green for me. The Kodak Portrait 100T, not bad. The Portrait 160 VC, a little better in my eyes. I like this. The materials are looking good. It's a little greenish for the copper. This is the Filmic base contrast. And you'll notice that compared to what we were looking at before, those same materials look washed out a little bit. You can increase the contrast. You can change some of this with the gamma and the exposure, but and this is Agfa Color Futura 2 100, Agfa HDC 100 Plus, Agfa Optima 2 100, Agfa Optima 2 200, Kodachrome 64, and a light bulb. All right, so all of these are fine, but for what I want to do, the Kodak, the Kodak 3000, that's what I really like. Where are you? Is that you? Yeah. There we go. So I really like this. I like how it renders out. It doesn't take away from the copper or the antique gold. The lights are okay. We can work on the bloom of the lights inside the warp engines. We get the nice diffuse appearance that we want on the hull with the mix of diffuse and glossy. It handles this handles the mix of glass and translucent that we want for the sensor domes and the lights behind them. But you, of course, you are free to choose whichever one you want. I simply wanted to point out that it is possible to make our renders look more realistic by using appropriate settings and using some color management in our renders. So thanks everybody. Save your work, do some test renders, and see what film choices you like. And I'm dying to see your work. Thanks again for all your time, and I'll see you next tutorial.